I just moved my studio, and while unpacking, I unearthed a lot of pliers and hammers. I've got a ton from teaching classes and having stuff available to share in class, but it's time to thin them out. Oh my goodness, where to begin? Okay, let's start with the nylon jaw pliers. Let me grab all of them here. Come on. Okay. So these are the only flat jaw nylon jaw pliers. I use these for holding metal when I don't want to mar it, or for straightening wire. These are definitely a keep. Now, let's see, let me put these down. These are both ring bending pliers. You can see it's got that groove. Hang on, there we go. It's got that curve within the nylon jaw. So squeezing along metal will bend the metal to that curve. And this is a really extreme curve, so it's great for rings. I don't need two. This one looks newer. I'll keep this one and de-stash that one. Now these are nylon jaw bending bracelet. So same as the ring bending pliers, except a little less dramatic curve. So great for bending into a bracelet shape, like a more open circle. These guys need a little help, but these are replaceable, these little screws here. So I'm going to put them in the D-stash, fix them and sell them. I don't need two. I used to teach a class where we use this a lot, so I used to have a bunch of these. But I think I will keep this and go ahead and de-stash that. All right, let's move on to chain nose. I'm going to grab all my chain nose. And my goodness, there is a lot. Oh gosh. Oh, I don't even think I can hold them all. This is a little over the top here. Someone's got a chain nose problem. Okay, let me start with bent chain nose. I'm going to put these down. Let me just grab, I only have 2 pair of bent chain nose. I use these mostly for myself. I use them for opening and closing jump rings. It's great to be able to grab them with that angle, but I don't need 2. I actually prefer the shorter ones rather than the longer ones. So I'll hang on to these, and some lucky person can purchase those. Then let's move on to long chain nose. To be honest, I don't know why I have these, because I really don't use long chain nose very much. I can see the use for it, but for me, I rarely use the tip out here. I just use my chain nose back in this area for opening and closing jump rings or for wire work. And out at the tip is pretty weak, and I usually work with pretty heavy gauge wire. So these are old school Lindstroms. I mean, these, I might have to keep them just because I've probably had them for 30, 35 years maybe. But I have them also in Tronics and Lindstrom ergonomic handles. I'm actually going to go ahead and de-stash all 3 of those because I prefer to use short chain nose, and that's just my preference. So I have 2 of the RX ergonomic handle Lindstroms, 1 of the Tronics, and 1 also Lindstrom, but different handle. These are nice, but I use these more, so I'm going to go ahead and de-stash that. I do love the Tronics. They're extra hardened out at the tip so they don't bend, and I use my Lindstroms a lot. I'm actually going to keep all 3 of these because I like to have like a stash of tools to travel with. I'm debating only keeping 2, but I'm keeping all 3. Awesome. Now flat nose, I seem to only have this pair. This is a very, very flat nose. Tronics, I don't even think we sell these anymore. This is great for making really sharp angles in wire, where you can see on the flat nose or the chain nose, it's got a rounded end here. So if I were to grab a wire and then bend it, it'll hit the rounded part eventually, where this is all squared off. So I like it for that reason. I also like it to use with chain nose for opening and closing jump rings. I'm keeping it. I really don't know how much I use that flat nose, so maybe I'll change my mind later. Okay, let's move on to round nose. These are the only two stepped round nose I see here, and I'm missing a medium wrap and tap, which I think is key. So I'm definitely keeping my large wrap and taps because I use them for making large loops, obviously. Something like ear wires, toggles, things like that. Rings, I use these a lot. You stay. These are stepped round nose where you have 6 different options of a consistent loop, whereas other round nose are tapered. So let's say you were going to make a coil or something. If you made a coil on a tapered round nose, it would end up more like a cone, where if you stayed on the same step here, it would be the same diameter throughout the whole thing. I actually do use these from time to time, so I'm keeping them. Regular round nose, I've got Lindstrom, Tronics, and Tronics. So I only have 3. I use these 2 a lot, the short round nose a lot for when I'm making tiny loops, which I make a lot of chain that way. So I definitely want to keep these 2, one for like a travel pair and one to keep on hand. And I love long round nose because we've got a larger diameter down at the base, so I can make like a 5 or 6 millimeter loop. I don't use the tip of long round nose very often. I really just use the base. So I'm going to hang on to these. Okay, not doing good so far. Look at my stash. Overflowing, not overflowing, but let's keep going. Okay, let's talk hole punch pliers. I guess we should go through hammers too. I have a lot of hole punch pliers from teaching classes, but I really only need one of each size. They come in 1.25 millimeter, 1.5 millimeter, and 1.8 millimeter, and that corresponds to the size hole that it makes in metal. So these look pretty new and nice. These are 1.8. I'll keep those. These are 1.5, I believe. Let's see what else we have. 1.5, 1.25, and 1.8. Okay, I don't need 2 1.8s. That's the only 1.25, so I'll hang on to that. And let's see how these do. They're both fine. I'll hang on to these and destash this. In case you're wondering, I put like a little padding here. It's paper or tape or something, so that when I punch, I don't mar my metal. So all of my hole punch pliers have that little padding there. All right, moving on. Let's move to cutters. You, and you. Oh gosh, and all of you. Well, let's just put them all right here. You could also count these if you wanted. These are shears. This is very rusty, obviously, but I used them the other day and they cut just fine. I actually have 3 pair of them though, so I'm gonna clean these up and sell them. These are shears for shorter cuts, and I use these quite a bit, so I'm gonna keep them. All right, well, let's talk about these guys. I need a very heavy cutter for cutting thick gauge wire, like 12 gauge, for cutting flat wire, like the wire I use for cuff bracelets, which is like a 1 millimeter or 1.5 millimeter thick by 5 millimeters, which is quite thick. And this guy, if you cut down towards the base, does a great job. You're staying. These also are considered heavy cutters. They do great on the thicker gauge wire, like 14 gauge, 12 gauge. Not as good on the flat wire. I only need one though. I'll hang on to this and destash this. This Tronics cutter is also for heavy gauges, and it cuts like butter. But you might be able to see that little nick right up there. See that little circle? I abused him. Maybe it was someone else. I could only have myself to blame. But that means I cut something too hard, maybe memory wire, which is a no-no on any of these cutters. So they still cut fine. They just won't cut well at that one little spot right there. These are really expensive, nice cutters. I'm going to hang on to them. This is my all-time favorite cutter. It's the Tronics 7223s. And they cut very, very flush. They're ultra flush. So what that means is when you cut a wire, the wire that's cut from this side will be very flat. The other side will still have a little pinch at the end of the wire because that's just the way cutters are made. In order to get a flat cut on both sides, you have to have cutters that like the blades pass each other. So these are ultra flush. They're very sensitive. I don't use them on gauges maybe heavier than like 20 gauge. I am going to hold on to both because this one is kind of messed up, so I don't want to sell it. This one's in really good condition, so I'm going to hang on to both. This is a cutter we used to carry. It's great. It cuts great, but I don't need it. This is a Lindstrom cutter, which I also really like, but not as much as my Tronics, so I can sell that guy. This is a cutter that a supplier sent me that has my logo on it, which yay, but I don't really care. It's super junky. I use it for cutting things that I shouldn't be cutting with my nice pliers, so he stays. And this is a crimping plier. Gotta have that for crimping your crimps, for stringing. You stay. You stay. All right, so if my goal was to get rid of a lot of pliers, I didn't do great, but at least I narrowed it down a little bit. And now I think we should go through the hammers. So here are a bunch of hammers that turned up when I unpacked. I actually use the majority of these, but let's go through them anyway. First of all, stamping hammer, 2 pounds. Love this hammer, but I actually like the Impress Art 2-pound hammer a little bit better. It's new. This is replaceable. I love the ergonomic handle, so I can get rid of this guy and keep this guy. Nylon mallet hammer, whatever you want to call it, used for flattening metal, hardening metal. Can't live without it. You stay. I don't use all these frets very often. I do use the riveting hammer, but these have their uses and they're beautiful and sexy, and I will fight you. You can't take them away from me. I'm keeping them all. However, I don't need 2 chasing hammers. So the problem though is, this one is all nicked up. It's been abused. So it's not the greatest for flattening metal. You can use it for chasing tools, hitting tools with it, but I'm going to keep this one because it's nice and flat. And this one, I'll just destash it and see if anyone wants it for a great discount. Marks on it. Hey, stay. And then last but not least are my 2 frets stamping hammers. Now they make a 1 pound, a 1.5 pound, and a 2 pound that I don't have. To be honest, I don't use the 1 pound as much as I use the 1.5 pound. This is my favorite stamping hammer. I love that the brass side is replaceable. I love that there's a stainless side for when you need a little extra oomph. I use them both. If I had to get rid of one, I'd get rid of this one, but I'm going to keep them both. So now I have a 1 pound, 1.5, and then that Impress Art 2 pound, and that works for me.